Hello, and a very warm welcome to today's seminar. I've just been looking down the chat. There's so many of you joining from all over the place. So very, very warm welcome to you all. Um, so a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. So you've got a great lineup of speakers contributing today for this seminar. So please start thinking of some questions that you would like to ask our panel and submit them into the Q&A box just in the middle there. And keep that chat going on the side and make some new connections with some procurement professionals from all over the world, it looks like here. So try and connect to some people and maybe even find them on LinkedIn afterwards. It's always good to network as much as possible, as much as we can in this virtual world. So today's seminar, it is as kindly sponsored by Workday, and this is the third and final seminar in this series where we were looking at high performing procurement. So we will send you the links to any of the seminars that you've missed so far. You missed some really great ones, so if you didn't see them, don't worry, we will send you the links. We're also recording today's seminar as well, so if you want to watch back again and catch up with some of the things that you might have missed or forgotten, or even if you found it so valuable you want to share with your teams when you get back to work, then don't worry, we'll be sending you a recording of this session next week. So today is going to be all about proactive supplier management in 2022. And you know, the pandemic has really thrown lots of things up in the air in terms of procurement and supply management and how we manage our suppliers. I think we've perhaps put a new lens on things or realised that we need to manage suppliers in a different way. Risks are coming from all angles. So supplier management is more important than ever. So you're in for a real treat today in getting some insights from our panel on how you might manage suppliers more effectively in your organisations. So without further ado, I would like to invite Michaela Dempsey, who is Senior Director, Demand Generation, Global Integrated Marketing Strategy at Workday. Hello, Michaela.
Good morning. Well, I guess good evening for most of you.
Yeah, I'm just saying hello these days because who knows who's joining from which area
Fair
of the world.
enough. Fair enough.
So it's an early start for you there, Michaela. So thanks for joining us today. So tell me a little bit about you and your role at Workday. That would be a good way to start.
Oh, great. A bit about me. I have a great love for technology and a passion for customer advocacy, coupled with driving revenue growth and building market presence. For almost 6 years, I've been collaborating with global procurement and supply chain leaders, helping to build what was formerly Scout, as well as integrating our sourcing solution into the Workday brand. Before my years with procurement, I worked with security, IT, financial, and mobile management startups. And some of these companies have gone public and others have been acquired.
Great stuff. So don't forget, we want this session to be interactive. So if you've got any questions for Michaela or the rest of the panel, please submit them in the Q&A. How has the role of suppliers changed over the last year? And how do you think it will continue to change, Michaela, in 2022?
Well, as we're all aware, the pandemic brought us an entirely unplanned experiment in remote working. The support for the business from enabling remote workers to every supplier contracted. This business continuity fell squarely on procurement and supply chain teams, and business outcomes continue to unfold as we hit basically season 2 of disruption versus digital transformation. Before the pandemic, leading organizations had already embraced cloud-based solutions that enabled supplier management. And for those teams and organizations, the lift was a bit lighter. When looking at strategic purchasing and suppliers, the best software enables teams to readily share information, collaborate, and use software to record, access, store, and report. A global Harvard survey found that 92% of executives classified digital maturity of their organization's sourcing and supplier management processes less than best in class. That's 92% going into the pandemic. This lagging digital maturity has resulted in prolonged procurement cycles, inefficient manual processes, stilted collaboration with suppliers, siloed data, and inaccurate reporting, and of course, decreased engagement. The others that had not had the opportunity to operationalize supplier collaboration found that the pandemic helped to support the request to move processes into the cloud, like contracting, scorecarding, supplier communications, business and legal requirements. I know early on, a lot of our customers were a little bit excited that they had this opportunity to really get these products installed because of what they were facing. And with the ever-changing environment for suppliers and the business, digital solutions enable all the parties to be nimbler. But how might this evolve in 2022 for suppliers and for procurement? Well, with digital acceleration comes greater control and compliance, which is critical considering that all the employees and suppliers are now highly remote. Reduced risk because of visibility, future cash commitments, and identifies bad actors in the purchasing processes. Has increased efficiency through automation, management by exception, and greater accuracy. And it has access to real-time data, which helps improve departmental effectiveness by fostering greater collaboration.
Absolutely. And I think lots of projects were put on hold at the beginning of the pandemic. As businesses are really uncertain about their cash flow, for instance. But I've seen that one area that still went full steam ahead was the investment in digital, and we've seen that a lot, really. I mean, we're all flung remotely. We couldn't see our suppliers like we used to, and so I think that's perhaps accelerated organizations' motivation to get more digital enabled. So yeah, absolutely. And why is supplier management a challenge for businesses today?
Well, I would say that supplier management has always been a focus area. In the years working with procurement leaders, this is a topic that comes up all the time. So to the truest definition of the word, this pandemic has magnified the focus, and for the better, honestly. It brought it right up into the boardroom, and as well as making top headlines, as we all know, in global news. If someone didn't know about supply chain and suppliers, they certainly do right now because of the reporters' hyper focus on all that's going on during the pandemic. And honestly, this is for the better. Procurement has always had this focus, but most organizations are lacking digital solutions that would allow for a more streamlined supplier process and better business outcomes. What can they do to have that? More visibility. That seems obvious, but it's hard if you aren't digital. If everyone has materials on their laptops or on their desks on paper, it's hard to have that visibility into supplier risk and performance. And then, of course, this is a needed step when you look forward into things like ESG, because one of the biggest contributions for that is having visibility, being able to know who your suppliers are, and understanding the governance of those suppliers.
Absolutely. I think there's so many more lenses on supply chain now, like you say, through the media, the boardroom. I mean, I've spoken to so many CPOs during the pandemic who said they've never been so popular with their board, but also business leaders, politicians. I think the Queen in the UK even cried out the need for greater procurement. So that lens on whether it's greater transparency or whether it's looking at ESG, COP26 only a few weeks ago, there's lots of lenses that are being shone spotlights on the supply chain, and more pressure on procurement professionals perhaps to get a better handle on it. That was fascinating. Thank you, Michaela. Stay with us, because now we're going to be joined by our two panelists today. So if I could introduce, let me find my notes, sorry to get the names right. Aaron Gint, Director, Vendor Risk and Governance at Athene, and Daniel Valencia, Vendor Risk Management Senior Analyst at Athene. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you all. So if I can go to Aaron first. So why is supplier management so important? Is effective supplier management a pathway for procurement becoming a true strategic partner, do you think?
Absolutely.
picking up on both what you, Emma, and Michaela mentioned, supplier management is really going to be the driver for ESG practices, code of conduct, ethics in business, things like diversity. You have your procurement department who's trying to make deals and negotiate and buy things. You have your business area who's trying to operate the business. But what really bridges that gap is the supplier management process to feed them information that they use. They don't have time to look at cybersecurity or disaster recovery plans. They need that fed to them in a way that makes sense. In addition, we have our board of directors, as you mentioned. We are becoming the most popular person in the board of directors room because somehow we have to combine all that information into some higher level reporting. And without systems and online systems, there really isn't a way to gather that information holistically. All of our buyers are working on different projects. Our business people are working on different projects. Supplier management is really the only piece that brings all that together. We're getting increased pressure from our rating agencies. They're really starting to look at ESG, reputational risk, the risk of doing business, as well as cybersecurity risk, disaster recovery risk, and overall financial risk of doing business, especially in the elevated environment here with, COVID. In addition, our investors want to make sure that we are doing business not only ethically, but also in a way that is protecting the money of our investors. We're a financial services industry. Customers give us money to invest and they expect us to handle that money appropriately. And we need to stay out of the news. We can't be affected by a ransomware attack. We can't be affected by a COVID disaster. We have to be prepared for that. And one of the preparations is knowing who we do business with and not getting pulled into those discussions. We've really become a third voice in the room between the procurement area, the business area, and now supplier management. Also, we're here to enforce SLAs, and that's all the more critical, especially in the COVID environment. Again, procurement, the buyers may be buying things, they're building those SLAs. The business tries to enforce those, but they don't always have the metrics that they need in order to manage those. So our area kind of fills that gap as well. And, supplier management industry as a whole, we have the ability to affect change. Just the simple act of asking a supplier, do they have a code of conduct? Do they have a code of ethics? Mm. What is their disaster recovery plan? What are their cybersecurity methods? Just by asking those questions, we're starting to see suppliers take note and realize that we mean business when we are entering into an agreement with them. And not only does it establish that ongoing dialogue with that supplier, but it also makes sure that that supplier knows that we're watching and that we find this relationship important. And if they can adhere to their end of the business, it extends opportunities for additional business with them in the future. So, bringing that all together, the supplier management, I think, is becoming more and more important. The employer market is really exploding. Organizations like yours are starting to promote it even more and more. And I think with the implementation of ESG, code of ethics, DR, especially all the things that COVID brought us, that this industry will only grow.
Excellent. Dan, would you agree there that your team is seen as more of a strategic partner to the business through the supplier management information that you guys can pull together?
Yeah, I totally agree that we have an important role to play. I mean, the procurement team, they're out there, making deals and that type of stuff, but we can assist them in that and do the due diligence and help, help them realize any risks associated with doing the deals and maybe help them mitigate any of the issues that they may have.
Yeah, Dan brings up a good point, the mitigation too. We also fill a role in driving change. So when we find that a particular vendor or supplier doesn't have accurate cybersecurity methods or good cybersecurity methods, we will initiate that conversation. Or if we get feedback from the business and the business is not happy with a particular aspect of the relationship, we can play the bad cop to the good cop if they want. We can just bring the two together and provide hard and fast metrics. And that's what we use the Workday strategic sourcing tool for, is to send out requests to the suppliers in mass and say, hey, can you provide us with this information? It pulls it back into one location. We can run metrics against it, and then and disseminate that to either as high as the board of directors or as individual business partners.
Excellent. Michaela, anything to add to there about procurement being more of a strategic business partner?
It's been exciting, honestly, to watch the transformation within the business. Procurement has always focused on all these things, always, since I've known them, and I know it must have happened before. And so having that spotlight really allows them to shine. Dan and Aaron are being generous right now. They really built an amazing system before the pandemic. They built this scorecarding system that started, in a sort of a neutral spot, and then over the few years of using it, really matured it so that they were truly prepared when we hit this pandemic, as much as you can be, and so when thinking about that and looking at that, they've even rolled in a second level as far as I understand that helps with ESG. So it's important to have these tools and have the collaboration, and I know that most organizations are looking for tools like this. It's just having the materials to bring, I think, to management, and this pandemic has opened up that conversation.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about the process that we set up.
Yeah, please do.
And it started, Michaela, about 2.5-3 years ago, a little bit before the pandemic. What happened was one of the reasons that our team exists is for regulatory requirements. So as a financial services industry, as an insurance company, not only are all 50 states in the United States have their own rules about how we need to operate our business, but also the country that we live in, as well as some of the domiciles that we have. So we have a holding company in Bermuda. Bermuda has a Bermuda Monetary Authority, which governs how you do business in Bermuda. And so our processes had to extend to that. Shortly after I started with the team 3 years ago, I was contacted by Bermuda, and they said, hey, the BMA wants to do an audit, and they want to make sure that we're accurately tracking the vendor relationships and the business that we have. We had a semblance of a program. It was an Excel sheet and a PowerPoint, and it was mostly anecdotal information that was collected. At the time, we had just implemented Scout, which is Workday Strategic Sourcing, for procurement purposes for our contracting system, and we knew that Scout had the ability to bring all this together in a supplier management program. So what we did is we quickly pulled together a list of all of our top vendors. We built a form in Scout and sent out requests for information. And basically what we did is we focused on things that we knew about. We knew that we needed to know about cybersecurity, disaster recovery, and supply, just general different categories of risk, operational risk. Built a questionnaire, contacted our vendors, said, hey, we're going to send you this questionnaire through this new tool, and please respond. We got 60 to 70% response rate, I believe, from those vendors. What was nice is that when they submitted their responses, it was all collected into one spot. And then what we did is we got all this information. We're like, well, how are we going to differentiate what we're seeing? What's a risky business to do business? What's a risky supplier and what's a not risky supplier? So we implemented a scorecard, and then we got to the next step, and we're like, who's going to do this scoring? It's basically Dan and I running the whole show here, and we have 2,500 vendors and several different points of metrics that we have to analyze. And what we did is we were able to use the tool to farm out that work to the experts in our company. You know, we're financial services, so we have financial experts. We have a cybersecurity area. We have an operational area. And we thought, well, and we have a compliance area for regulatory compliance. So we said, hey, can you guys take a look at some data if we send it to you and score it? So we sent out that data to those different areas within the company, got a lot of great cooperation from those areas. And they were really excited to help because they knew that this was an area that we needed to focus on. It's been a general concern with a lot of the business areas of the suppliers that we do business with. And so they scored. We were able to create those scorecards, dump it out into a nice presentation. And I was able to present that to our Bermuda partners so that we could make sure not only did we complete the requirements of the BMA, but also provide some real valuable information for action. And out of that conversation came a couple discussions where, you know, some of the lower risk suppliers we just ignore. You know, we don't need to worry about those, but the higher risk ones, we did initiate conversations with those businesses, had them send additional information and initiate those conversations with the business. Ultimately, it's the business owner's responsibility to determine how to assess that risk or understand what risk they want to take on in that relationship. But we're able to provide them with that data, and that really drove the program forward very quickly because we had a tight deadline to get it done. And so we've built on that over the last few years. COVID really kind of threw a wrench into things, but fortunately we had that process set up early.
And Aaron, I would add on a little bit as well. We had an organization in Australia, and the person who was heading up procurement there had used our platform before, so that did make things a little speedier. But they were able to get the whole process up and working for them in a new environment in less than 2 weeks. And one of the things that was most critical in their case was getting, you know, the new laws and codes out to all the suppliers. So they had thousands and thousands of suppliers. They were able to move all the contract, you know, get the product installed, move all the contracts into the system, and then be able to communicate with all the suppliers with essentially with the touch of a button, and then have that all recorded back in a certain amount of time so that they could provide the government the regulation acceptance to the COVID laws, because Australia left some of their businesses open, which left their borders open, and they had to be able to let these workers come in, and they were coming in from around the globe. And so this tool allowed them to be able to, because Australia sent out more than 10 regulation changes in the very beginning of, and they're probably still doing it now, but and so it made it much easier overall for the team because they weren't managing email threads and checking the boxes. It was just a push and then review.
Excellent. Yeah. And Daniel, if I come to you, so Aaron talked about some of the key drivers that really pushed this forward with employing a supply management system, and I guess being in a heavily regulated environment is one of those key drivers. But should all organizations be looking to do this? What are the common key drivers that all procurement teams should really be considering to really bottom out supplier management, and how can the technology help?
Well, first off, I think we got to realize that the world's getting smaller. You know, there's so many more suppliers and vendors that you're dealing with. You know, you may have started out back in the day like a small town with small limited, you know, suppliers, you know, one person being able to do one thing, but now you have so many choices out there. Yeah. And I think having, I think technology is so crucial behind the, you know, having a good supply management system. Being able to have a one-stop shop of a 360-degree view of all your suppliers, so you can be able to analyze and assess the risk of those suppliers is key, along with the ability to store, you know, information about the suppliers, like diversity and documentation on that. So the technology is huge, and getting that one-stop shop is very important. And then once you have that one-stop shop, is then getting, like Aaron explained earlier, getting all the experts in your organization to sit there and weigh in on the compliance items, the legal items, and all that stuff. So that way you're not relying on all the work yourself. You're making the experts do all the stuff, and then you can combine all that information. And then once you have all the information, you can easily report out that information to anybody that needs it. And the thing about that technology is being able to standardize your forms, so that way you can get unbiased responses and questions, and make a true assessment of the supplier. Get that. Just because Joe has a good relationship with them, obviously they're going to score them high. But getting more people involved, and getting that unbiased assessment is really key to make sure you provide the best risk assessment possible to everybody.
One of the things that we've noticed too is we can pinpoint things that need fixed with the relationship and feed that information to our procurement buyers and say, hey, next time a renewal comes up, you might want to require that they have some sort of cybersecurity insurance, because their requirements are really low right now, or their coverage is really low right now. And we've done that several times where we've put just kind of mental notes or action items on a particular contract that we have, and so that the next time it comes up for negotiation, not only can it be used as a negotiation tool, just to get some leverage, but also as a way to influence change and make sure that we have a solid contract going forward.
Absolutely, and it's enabling the business, like you say, those experts in those departments to make better informed business decisions. Excellent. According to the McKinsey report that you mentioned earlier, Michaela, 71% of supply chain leaders said they were ramping up the use of analytics to help in advanced planning. Have you noticed an increase in organizations investing in supply technologies in response to the pandemic? We touched on this briefly in our intro.
We did, and they certainly are. It's amazing to see. We have done a bunch of different studies. One of our customers from Blue Cross of Tennessee was sharing that every vice president and above in their company has measurable goals tied to diversity. And now with the reporting within a digital tool, they're able to see and log in and make sure that all these areas are happening. And the other part that's interesting, and kind of to lean on what the team at Athene was saying, is that you need to double check into the security and communicate with your suppliers, but you are also a supplier to another organization. And so this interwoven fabric altogether is important. And so the more reporting you have, the tighter your house is, the stronger the overall fabric is of the supply chain.
And Aaron and Dan, have you noticed that your organization has been more receptive to investing in digital technology since the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. Because we're selling financial products, we're fairly technical to begin with. Most of our sales and purchases are indirect. We're buying software and services and that sort of thing. But the investment has definitely been in areas. So we now have a VP of ESG. We have a VP of supplier diversity, which the heavy focus is suppliers, because we know that we can impact change there very quickly. So we're definitely seeing increased focus on some of those areas that may have taken a back seat in the past. Anecdotally, the job market is hot. We've had several people in our area leave to other companies here in Iowa. And the reason that they left is because other companies are starting up supplier management programs just like ours. And the people who have left and the jobs that are open are to build from scratch new supplier management processes, get out of the Excel sheets and get into some sort of technology that can facilitate large supplier management processes. Also, there's things where the pandemic has forced us to think about supplier weaknesses and failure points, and there's no other way to collect all that information than through technology. We're also starting to see that when we request data from other suppliers, they're directing us to their particular site that they can provide that data to us. So they already have warehouses of information because they know they're going to get asked this information. Just yesterday, we were sent a brand new email address called Supplier Management Request Response Mailbox or something like that. Basically what they said is we're getting so many of these requests for information, we have to operationalize that too. And I guarantee they're not using, you know, Excel document and a SharePoint site to do that. They're building things, Dropboxes, and using other technology to stage that information as responses. Now, what I'm a little concerned about going forward is that we're going to start to get canned responses from suppliers because they know that this response will check the box for what we're asking. So that's where that next level of engagement and involvement is going to come in, where we will be having face-to-face conversations with the people who provided those responses and say, yeah, I like your cybersecurity score. Can I talk to your CISO and let's walk through what your responses were? And that's where we've seen a lot of value with these engagements. Most recently, you know, we've had a lot of very highly visible ransomware attacks here in the US and across the world. And so we initiated a separate effort outside of our normal annual cadence and supplier onboarding and that sort of thing, just to focus on ransomware, and sent out a simple questionnaire, got some responses back, and we use that as our leverage for initiating conversations with some of the CISOs in the supplier organizations. So I think not only are we using technology to request this information and chew it up, but also using technology on the other side to respond to these types of requests is going to be key. Suppliers are going to be overwhelmed with a lot of requests from all their customer base asking them the same questions, and they're going to have to find ways to respond to that.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump out to a question from our audience at the moment, because we were just talking about the impact of the pandemic, etc. And have you been able to, through the supplier management process and systems you've put in place, monitor things like price increases, availability of supply, and closely monitor supplier financial performance, maybe looking out for those suppliers who've perhaps struggled?
Yeah, definitely. So we use Dun & Bradstreet financial reporting system, where we're able to review the financials of suppliers and watch them progress over time. It's kind of like a credit rating for suppliers. And we've definitely received more alerts during the pandemic of concerns about financial situations with some of our suppliers, and have addressed that either with the supplier themselves to ensure that we're going to be doing continued business with them, but also to alert our business to say, hey, this is a risky area. Do you have a second option in place? I'd say most of the analysis that we've done lately has been around laptop shortages and physical hardware. You know, we have to refresh our hardware every 3 years, especially our laptops. Things break, they get out of date, and we implement new software that needs higher powered laptops. And we went from being able to get a good supply of a couple hundred laptops in a week or two to now looking at 6 months, 9 months ahead. And how do we manage that? And if we weren't actively looking at pricing, if we weren't actively managing our current suppliers, we may not know that until it's too late. During the pandemic, we knew that there would be shortages, and so we started looking at alternative ways to receive things. We also changed our way of doing business. The pandemic required us to buy things that we've never bought before. You know, we had to buy PPE. A company in the middle of Iowa, in the middle of the country, does not need PPE, but all of a sudden we did. And by
when the whole world needed it as well, it was like the Wild West. Yeah. And
by the way, we may have to buy this from people here locally who are building things out of their garage, you know, and supplying those. And we didn't have resources or ways to purchase those things. So we had to make adjustments and start to move our behemoth financial purchasing process into a way that we could be nimble and buy from vendors that we've never done business before, and onboard them quickly and ramp them up and start to pull out the credit card and cross our fingers and buy things, off Amazon, which we hadn't done a lot of before. And since then, we've been able to translate that, and we kept that process. We said, hey, now that we have a way to buy stuff quick and we can implement that quick, let's keep it. And so we definitely not only found a way to work around some of those shortages and buy things in a way that we haven't bought before, but now we're just keeping that process going and being able to be a lot more responsive to the business. The shortages, though, that's continual thing that we have to look at. And we are not a supply chain organization. We are not managing the suppliers managers, right? So that's new to us. And so we're entering into a new world with especially the laptop and IT equipment shortages.
And I would jump in a little bit on the price increases. What is exciting in our product is that we have a tool that allows you by line item to really go back and look at and model what your previous prices were, what the inbound prices are, what the variance difference is, an ability to communicate with your supplier, or even target and make sure a strategic supplier is a critical one that your business is okay with adding additional dollars to. As you were saying, Erin, like this, you need certain supplies, and so there might be a point where the importance of the supply is more important than the dollar spent, and then at least you have validation on all those points, so that going back in time, you can look at everything because it's all documented, and then getting to the security question and the importance of understanding your suppliers. One of the top priorities, honestly, in looking at security is our controls. And with a digital solution, you have more controls in place that you can audit and things you can look at than you do, honestly, without having one, because everything is in place. It's detailed. There are rules who can communicate, rules who can't, and you know who's touched something last. So it really does give you an overall greater protection to have all of this together in a place that, risk can look at it, a CEO, finance, procurement, and anyone honestly in the business.
Excellent. And that accessibility, I guess, is critical, really, for making those decisions quite quickly that had to be done in the height of the pandemic. So having that information to your fingertips. So the report that we talked about, the McKinsey report, and we've actually shared the link to it in the chat, and we'll send it out on an email to everyone who's attended as well. That same report concluded, though, that while companies would build on the momentum they'd gained in the pandemic in terms of digitalization, others may be slipping back and reverting to old ways of working. Is this really a make or break moment for procurement? I mean, we've seen here the intel, the accessibility of data, the information that you can equip your business with to make those better informed decisions. Surely, if people are going to start putting the brakes on here, then procurement's profile is going to be damaged. Michaela, do you want to pick that one up first?
I don't believe that procurement will be damaged. I think it is procurement and supply chain's responsibility that once you have this focus to keep that top of mind. And the thing that's going to really help any business is the reporting. It's all the documentation, is the ease of use and the ability for, again, all the departments to be able to, whether it's your stakeholders, your suppliers, the other critical aspects of the business, from contracting to legal to risk, everything is in one place. And if you're waking up in the middle of the night concerned, you have access. You already know who your suppliers are. You already have the documentation. Your audit team comes in. They have everything they need. And no matter where your team is, no matter what time, it's all available. And that's only going to make procurement and supply chain managers more powerful by having that reporting and having that availability. It's really in their hands to sort of keep that train moving.
Daniel, and I guess it for Athene, it's going to just be building and building. I guess you guys are not going to be putting the brakes on in terms of your maturity in this area of digitalization, this data and supplier management information.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that any good organization, any good program, whatever, you always have to adapt. You always have to better yourselves, because if you're just stagnant or stale or whatever, you're not going to grow. You're just going to be left in the dust. So you always have to find and refine your process and improve and that type of stuff in order to get ahead or at least stay competitive with your competitors.
Yeah, and I guess like if you're standing still, then you're going backwards anyway, really, to a certain degree. Aaron, go on, you were going to say something there.
Yeah, the strongest are going to survive, and if you stand still, you're going to get passed up really quickly. And diversity is a great example. Supplier diversity, it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do. You can have a semblance of a program without technology, but to really report and understand where your target areas are to grow, you have to do some analysis, and to not have a program is really going to put you a few steps behind. In addition, I go back just because we're such a regulated industry. The state of California has requirements for insurance companies for supplier diversity reporting. We can't do that without some sort of electronic system and some sort of analysis and tracking. I don't know how we would be able to respond to the state of California legislative requirements if we did not have some sort of tool to do this with. And I don't see that going away. I see it happening more and more, especially, right now with ESG and just general environmental concerns. We're starting to see legislation pass requiring different types of requirements around environmental stewardship. How are you going to report that when you're asked? And how are you going to maintain that? Same thing with COVID requirements and vaccination status and that sort of thing. How do you respond to that? And who's going to do that? It's going to fall on the supplier management side, because we're the ones who have control over it. And we're also the ones who have all the contact information. No one else in the company knows the contacts for all 2,500 vendors. We're the only ones who have that. So how do we get that? It's through our area.
No, exactly that. And whether it's supply chain risks or whether it's ethical risks, they're just going to keep growing, whether it's ESG or whether it's supplier diversity, like you say. It's constantly keeping up to date with what the latest risks can pose on your businesses, really. So we have a couple of questions through. If you were started from nothing, i.e. no single business system and various views in the business, are you better concentrating on defining and measuring what is key within the business versus jumping into a digital solution? I guess if you've got nothing, no starting place in terms of digitalization, what would your advice be on a starting position there?
I'll jump. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Michaela.
Go, Michaela.
I jump in first only because I know you guys did you did a great job in building all that out, but I look at it in a very simple way. Imagine you've done a lot of laundry and you have this huge pile, right? You have to do it. So either you pull from the middle, you start grabbing things, you have to start. You have to have a system, because otherwise it gets chaotic. And so what isn't really complicated is finding a tool that is simple and easy to use, and jumping in and getting the parts and pieces into the system. That's square one. Just having it, as Aaron just said, knowing all the names, knowing all the contractors, knowing all the contracts, and going from there. And the Athene team did such an amazing job, because they looked at it and said, okay, we haven't really done it in a system. Let's start at neutral, which is putting everything in and looking at it, saying we like these suppliers, so we'll start here, and then we'll start scoring. But if you don't start and you keep doing everything manually, you just have this monstrous pile, and you're sort of always spinning.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, like if you're trying to start out and you don't have a system and you need to sell it to your CEO and say, hey, we need a system. How do you sell that idea? I think the simple way is pick 10 vendors, send them an email, ask them for some information, and build some sort of presentation that says, here's my analysis on what they have, our business relationship, their performance, their whatever tools you have at your disposal, analyze them, knowing that there's plenty of other stuff you could analyze, but you don't have the capacity to do, and present that back to your executive leadership and say, hey, I was able to pull this together, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. You know, we have ESG, we have regulations coming down, we have diversity coming down, we have cybersecurity, we have ransomware, all the disaster recovery. I can do this in a limited fashion using emails and Excel, but we really need to build this so that you have, as Dan had mentioned, a 360-degree view of your supplier base, who you're doing business with. And you don't want your key supplier to be in the news under a ransomware attack, and you have no way to get to some of your needed supplies.
Great stuff. We have a question through as well. It's someone from the oil and gas industry, and they're struggling with common materials used in multiple different projects, and everybody having a minor engineering consultants advising on minor changes for quite common materials. And I guess you know, that's putting more delays on, more processing, more purchase ordering, and less leverage. And I guess a system like this could give the business much more visibility on the risk and the cost of managing that. And would you be able to use the system to give visibility on just how many different products or the same products you're buying from multiple vendors?
Yes, I'll jump in. So we have organizations that are in oil and gas as well as manufacturing, and they do have contractual needs of products that are difficult. And what I did see and what continues to happen in the pandemic is your supplier base is moving around depending on, you know, where the challenges are at the moment with that country's health, physical health. And so by having that visibility, having multiple suppliers, so that the results that I have heard from our customers are that they have, you know, instead of having one backup supplier, they have basically multiple now backup suppliers in all the different continents if they're critical pieces, so that they do constantly have something that they can go into and provide for the business. It's not the most cost efficient solution, but when it's critical for the business outcome, that's where you need to have that. And it's all available within the tool and searchable, and anyone in the organization, including that stakeholder that might need something, can access and see that.
Excellent. We had a message through as well. Can the supplier management system work in remote areas? So how do you manage, how accessible is the system? For particularly, I guess this is where suppliers have limited internet connection, but I guess the same could apply for small organizations right up to large. Is it accessible for all suppliers? Michaela, do you want to pick that one up?
Oh yeah, I can. Like my absolute favorite story is with Beam Suntory. And so Beam has used the solution for a long time, but they once they merged with Suntory, they had a much greater global view of suppliers. And one of their suppliers is in their 90s, and he does not have a computer. He makes he grows the rice for the sake, and his grandson will go onto his mobile device and do all the supplier questionnaires, etc., right in that, and then submits it back in. So it is very simple. So 100% of their suppliers use the product. It's very easy, and so I love that story, because it's just, it really speaks to how interconnected we all are.
No, exactly. And when supplier diversity is one of your targets and trying to work with smaller organizations, then accessibility really is key. Um, Based on your experience during COVID-19, it's a question that's come through. Have you switched more? I guess this is for Aaron and Dan. Have you switched more to short-term or longer-term contracts, fixed price contracts? How have you managed that risk? Have you seen a more of a change in contract terms and fixing prices?
That's a good question. And Dan, you may be able to chip in as well. I personally have not seen a lot of different contract terms than our standard. We'll do short-term contracts, but most of our contracts are around 3 years, and that's to establish a relationship and get price breaks on items. So again, we do a lot of indirect sales. So we're buying services from vendors. We're buying some IT equipment, but a lot of it's software that we know it's going to take 2 years just to get the software running, not to mention, another year of using it. So we're looking at multiple year contracts, but that might be just the nature of our business. With the products that we purchased, I'd say that we aren't necessarily entering into long-term agreements for PPE and that sort of thing. Some of the one-off purchases that we do, we'll just do one-off purchases and not enter into a longer-term agreement with those. Dan, you see a lot of the contracts come through as well. I don't know what you've seen.
No, I've seen exactly what you mentioned, the 3 years for the main stuff, and then, short term, the 1 year or less for the things that are, one-time buys and whatever. But yeah.
Excellent. Great. Right. We're out of questions and we're about out of time, really. So I wanted, if I could ask you all just to come up with one little tip that you would leave for our viewers today, if they were looking to embark on a supplier management system, whether that's from a starting position or what they would need to get involved in order before they started, or even how they could go and build a business case. I don't know who wants to go first there on one little tip for our viewers today.
Sure, I can start, and that's literally start with what you know, and usually that's a handful of vendors that you do business with regularly. Ask them questions, put it into some sort of report, and present to your leadership. That you can do in a couple weeks, right? And show the value of what this information can be compiled. Your executives may be getting this information from bits and pieces from different areas, but if you can put it into one piece of paper and do a summary on a page and say this supplier has some weakness here, it has some growth here, that information they can lock away in their head so that next time that the negotiation comes up, they can remember that, and you can at least get your foot in the door of building that program.
Good advice. Thanks for that. Dan.
Yes. So for me, to kind of piggy off of Aaron there, I'm also like a data guy. So for me, it's always try to collect as much data as you can, right? On the vendors, on the process, whatever, and try to store it, all that information in the same place if you can, because you can always go back later and review that information, analyze it, and that type of stuff. But for me, the more data you have about the stuff is key into making better decisions down the line.
Excellent. Great advice. And Michaela.
And I would double down on what Aaron has shared, and Daniel. By starting, you're going to go steps forward. You're going to slide backwards. It's okay. And then you go forward a little bit more. You document, you report, you have it all. But it's just taking that first step. You have to do it. It's challenging, and we would love to help you take that first step if that's where you want to go.
Excellent. Good advice. I guess it seems quite big and daunting, and and it's just like the elephant in the room, but pick a leg, take a bite, get going, see what happens. Thank you very much to everyone, Aaron, Daniel, and Michaela. That was a really fascinating debate. And go to Workday's website, find out more about what they do and how they can help you. We've shared all of the reports in the links here, and we'll send the website link and those reports in a follow-up email. And like I said, this session's been recorded as well, so you can watch it back or share with your teams as well. and catch up with those other ones that you missed as well. So the other Workday seminars. Massive, massive thank you to Workday. Continue to be a big supporter of CIPS. So thank you very much for sharing your insights and expertise with us. And Aaron and Daniel, it's so great to hear how it's been put into action and given such great results. So thank you very much, everybody. And that's a wrap for today. So and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.